So welcome to today's podcast. I'm super excited. I get to hang out with the Italian stallion, not the one that you might remember from Rocky, right? But this one's going to be a heavy hitter too. Listen, this is going to be a fun episode. You're going to learn tons from our special guest here, Joey Mure, rhymes with puree. So thank you for that. Thank you for that little hint. Right, because I hate mispronouncing. I grew up always getting my name mispronounced. I had to change it from Suthi to Tom. So now I go by Tom. But so Joey Mure, thank you for joining us today. He's a serial entrepreneur, a co-founder of the Wealth Without Wall Street. I didn't know if that's possible to have wealth without Wall Street, but we'll talk more about that. And he's a podcast host as well, a Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, ranked one of the top ones across. I'd highly encourage you to go listen in on that. So, Joey, welcome to the podcast.
Tom, thank you for not brutalizing my name like everybody else does. And by the way, I feel like I'm in great company because your name probably gets brutalized worse than mine ever would. So I appreciate you.
No, I agree. And I made the point where it's, I've really tried to, because I've constantly been butchered. Actually, my parents from Thailand. So, it's those strings of consonants that never should be placed next to each other, but they kind of just wrap them in there just to confuse people. But that's where I grew up. But anyway, well, welcome. Listen, we have tons to talk about, before, hitting the press button here and talk about a lot of different things. But before we get rolling on some of the specifics, I'd love for you to share just a little bit about your background, the interesting sort of flow and journey where you've come from and kind of where you are now. So if you don't mind sharing, appreciate it.
Well, first of all, Tom, the good news is, I'm just like you. I'm just like the person listening right now. I had a terrible financial education growing up, had no good mentors in the space. In fact, I grew up in the church, which to me is one of the worst financial educators that there is. There's a very scarce mindset around finances and wealth, which is so crazy because the Bible is actually the opposite on that. And I love to share with people as I've learned. But the key is, man, there were things I had been told: go to school, get good grades, go to college, get a good job, allow someone to pay you well, and then put it into 401ks and IRAs. And man, at some point, you're going to be able to ride off into the sunset and do all the things that you put off in life because that's what everybody's supposed to do. And I found out really early on that just wasn't the road for me. In fact, I was a banker. I worked for Wells Fargo Mortgage for 11 years. And during that time, I started making well over $300,000 a year in my 20s. And I thought, nowadays that's like nothing because of inflation. But, back in the day, that was considerable. And so I looked at my life at that point and I said, man, I would have thought it would feel more free because I have all this income. I did not realize that higher incomes did not equal financial freedom. In fact, it was just quite the opposite. I have a wife and 5 daughters, Tom. Most people start praying for me immediately when I say that. But at the time when I started to learn this kind of thing, I had 3 daughters. And I remember distinctly working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks in the mortgage business to create that kind of income. And so even on vacations, I would sit at the beach, which is one of my favorite places to go. And I would tell my wife and kids, hey, you guys go on down to the beach. I just have to take this one more phone call and I'll be right behind you. And undoubtedly what would happen is 3 hours later, I'm walking down that boardwalk behind the condo and I'm excited to get down to the beach finally. And what do you think I saw? My wife and those kids, my daughters, beautiful daughters, looking at me walking the opposite way on the same boardwalk. And their faces are just disgusted. Like, Dad, you're here, but you're not here. Yeah. Right? And if you're listening to this you may or may not have been in the same position. Maybe it's something else for you. Maybe it's that you have to constantly say, no, I can't be at your travel ball game, or I can't be at your ballet recital because I've already taken too much time off. You know, when we went on our vacation, I had to take extra time off. I literally was in that boat, and I realized that my time was being traded for money at a higher rate, maybe higher than I thought, but it was still not my time. My calendar was not my own. And man, there's several different events that kind of started to clue me in that I needed to make a change, but that's just one just comes to mind that like something isn't right. And I know that I need to make a change. I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah, no, I personally experienced things like that. And you know how it is. And most people I talk to are trying to do these wonderful things for their families and provide for them. And all their time being spent is away from them. Right? Just like you described. And we can kind of almost justify in our heads, oh, this is doing everything for them. But the things that are probably most precious and will probably sit with them, you know, well, even after we're gone, is the time we spend with them. Right?
You know, we become strangers to the people that we love the most, in the hope that what we're doing is actually like getting us, like helping them to get more of what they want. And it's just a lie, right? It is a complete lie. And there's so many other lies that we've been told that I'm really passionate about telling people about, because you still have time today to make a change, right? Like the idea to defer your life until retirement is a lie. I mean, we all know it's a lie. Like if you think about it, who do you know that actually retires and then within a year or two are either severely debilitated from a health issue or they die? Literally, like within years of them actually retiring from whatever it is that was their life's work. And I will reference the Bible just because that's my faith journey, but there's nothing in the Bible that talks about retirement. Right? Retirement means to be taken out of service. And you and I are never to be taken out of service. We are always to be in a position to serve those around us, the people that God's entrusted it to us, well. And you can't do that if you're just like keeping your head down and just putting money away and hoping for the best, and then look up one day and you're like, oh, I don't want to work anymore.
Right.
Like it's just opposite of what we should be doing.
No, I 100% agree. And you can relate because we got kids that are growing, they're learning, they're trying to, you know, find their own path. And we could tell them, hey, you have special gifts and skills, and there's a reason you've been put on the earth. You got to figure out what that is.
Exactly.
But then when I'm 65 arbitrarily, I'm going to just shut it down. I'm going to ignore those things that I was given and learned and can provide in terms of service to others. And I'm just going to stop forever.
Yeah, that tells me you don't have a really good purpose, right? It tells me you're really just trading time for money and waiting until you can have some freedom. And my goal, and I love your goal as well, Tom, is to tell people that's just not the way there's an alternative that begins today, right? Freedom does not have to be something we defer.
So, the concept of freedom, and it's, living in this country, I certainly as I've grown older, I appreciate the freedoms that we have, right? That, I love this country. Is it perfect? Of course not. But there's so many things that we have been given freedoms to do and choose who we get to hang out with, how we, create value in this world. And unfortunately, I think, that the system's designed in a way that steers you to have less freedom. So for you, Joey, how would you define financial freedom, right? Because I hear that term a lot. Like, what's your definition of that?
Well, and I hope you don't mind me sharing some stories along the way that helped me kind of shape this, because I think it's one thing, if I could just tell you the formula is passive income greater than monthly expenses, right? It's not my formula. I mean, Robert Kiyosaki is the godfather of financial freedom, in my opinion, and that was his formula. But for me, it became real I was taking one of my daughters to school. It always involves my kids, right? But I was taking one of my daughters to her preschool. This was years ago. And she's sitting in the back seat. She's all kind of got her jacket on, got her little seat belt and her car seat, the little harness. And she's like, Dad, you going to pick me up from school today? And I'm like, I was kind of like a little bit perturbed by the question, because it was kind of like, you already know the answer to this, it was rare already for me to be dropping her off, because I'm usually already at work. And when I was in the mortgage business, there's no way I was even dropping her off. This was kind of a rare day. And I'm like, no, of course I'm not going to pick you up this afternoon. I said, no. And she says, why are you not going to pick me up? And I said, well, I have to go to work. And she says, why do you have to go to work? And I said, well, I have to pay for the car. I have to pay for our house. I have to pay for the food that we eat. And she says, well, we already have a house. We already have a car. And it was just one of those moments, Tom, where it's like, it's so innocent, her questions. And it wasn't like I didn't know the answers. Like, well, duh. I mean, things cost money to continue on. It's not like you have a house one time and you never have to pay for it again. But what the thing that kind of rang true in my mind, and the anchor that really I tied to this idea of financial freedom, is that the word have to. I told my daughter, who at that stage in her life wanted me to come pick her up from school so that we could go and do Barbies, or we could go play at the park, or we could go fishing or do something. She wanted to spend that time with me. And my answer to her was, I have to go to work. And the only reason I said that is because I didn't have something else paying for my monthly expenses that didn't require me and didn't require my time. And that's passive income, right? So it's easy to kind of logically say the formula is passive income greater than monthly expenses. But it's another thing to say, I need something to pay for my expenses so that I can say yes to my 3-year-old who wants to spend time with me today. Because as you know, my 17-year-old doesn't want to spend time with me the same way that my 3-year-old wants to spend time with me. Am I right?
That's right.
I mean, we both have 17-year-olds, so I'm just using that as an example. They want to do other things with me at this point, but that's because I've invested the time throughout their lives that now they want to spend time with me. But you just never will get those times back. And it only is possible with passive income.
Yeah. And it's that concept of, our scarcest resource of time, right? Time is we all have the same amount of, as far as I'm aware, unless you can tell me something different, we all have the same amount of hours in a day, minutes in a year, whatever. And, how we spend it is so critical. And I fell into that trap on myself, just getting into a rhythm of it. And it's just kind of like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
And until you kind of pep up and sort of take notice of things like you're noticing, like, these are precious times that could get lost, and you can't just buy them back, right? They're gone.
100%.
And we're not guaranteed tomorrow, right? I've become a learner of like the stoicism and thinking about that, and we are mortal, and those days and times may not come to us. We might not have them.
100%.
So take advantage where you can. Now, to your point, passive income is something that we aren't really taught to build growing up, right? Because we're putting them in areas whether it's in our retirement accounts or, jammed in our house that you can't access, that, nothing's creating anything. So
exactly.
Like, how did, this is where you touch on maybe a couple topics here. Like, how did you kind of first get your feet wet into even generating passive income, because you're not used to it? Right?
Yeah.
What was your sort of journey through that?
Well, I want to encourage you as you listen to this. I did not have a background, as I mentioned, in this. In fact, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, even, hey, so how can you create passive income? I literally would have not had an option for you other than you could buy a rental property, Like literally, that was the only possibility in my brain because I had no idea. And so my encouragement to you is that if you just invest in yourself, and by being on this podcast and listening, you're actually investing in yourself right now. You're going to be light years ahead of where I was. But the bigger point that I found over the years is that the biggest issue that keeps people from creating passive income and financial freedom as a result is not having access to cash. And that's why for me, the first step was the infinite banking concept, right? I was meeting with a friend and he said, man, I'm going to start referring people to you for mortgage business. But in order for me to do that, I need you to read this book and understand like my context. How am I advising clients? He was a financial advisor. And I said, okay, sure, I'll read it. And it ended up being Become Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. And if you've never read the book, by the way, you owe it to yourself. Go out and buy that book today. It's like $20 on Amazon. It's 88 pages. It's easy to read in one sitting. And I read the book and I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I've been looking for, right? There's an uneasiness. There was always an uneasiness for me to put money into my 401k because it just felt like gambling. It felt like I really have no idea what I'm investing in. I couldn't tell you any of the people in these mutual funds, the companies in them. I couldn't tell you how to affect the outcome because there was no control given to me in any way, shape, or form. And I also had in the back of my mind, I'm just not really that smart when it comes to these things. So I need to give up control of my money to someone who is smart. And all those things came unraveled when I read the book because it was like, wait a minute, you should take over the banking function in your life. You should be in control of your finances. And again, looking at it from a big biblical standpoint, I'm always called to be a steward of what God's given me, including the money that I have. But I was not being a steward of that. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do by giving up that money to my 401k administrator. And by the way, it wasn't going well. Like I didn't feel any more free by putting more and more money into those vehicles. And I had turned off the creativity that is required to make money and passive income. My brain had shut off because in my mind, I'd given this money up to someone else who's a quote unquote money manager, and they're going to get creative with it. Why would I have to invest in myself to learn about short-term rentals or land flipping or private lending or any of the multitude of things that we've been able to invest in since? I never had any reason to learn it. And you know how limiting that is? Like all I have is this one trick pony, and that is give money to somebody else and hope it works out. That is not a strategy. That is hope. And hope is for a lot of other things. It's not for where you put your money.
Yeah. And the narrative is just so strong in people. I've come across a lot of folks. It just, almost in a sense, giving up on it, right? There isn't better alternatives, right? They've been taught in a certain way and they've almost succumbed to it to a point where it is what it is, right? And
100%.
Right? And for people who are listening to your podcast or this one, like this is where you can learn about those alternatives. And, we've always talked about it. I've said this on a lot of podcasts. No one's going to care about your money more than you will.
100%.
I don't care who your advisor is. They're going to maybe do some great things for you. But you have to take ownership of it, right? And make the decisions and get the right information. But unfortunately, it's just for a lot of folks that come across, they almost feel beaten down. Like this is the path.
Right. And by the way, just if we're kind of going in order here, I got introduced to that concept. I started funding my very first policy, and within a year, created 3 policies because I started to have my eyes opened. And I liken it to the picture of like if you're standing at the end of a tunnel, right? And if I'm at this one end of the tunnel, I'm looking at the other end, you can see like this small circle. And that's all you can see. There's the light at the other end. You can see it. But as you walk closer to the other end of the tunnel, what happens? It starts to open up, right? You start to see more of what was always there. It's not like there's new information. It's just that you're now closer to it and you can see more of it. And so as I started to kind of implement this process of becoming your own banker, I started stacking up cash, right? Tons of it that I didn't have access to before. And so I'll give you an example. I was in the mortgage business, right? So I'm talking to people all the time about real estate investments. And guess what I used to think before implementing Become Your Own Banker? They'd say, hey, man, this is a great deal. It's just only 6 months. We need cash for this or that. And it's $100,000 and blah, blah, blah. And we can, it'd be 150 in 6 months. You just have to have the cash now. And I would say, man, that sounds great for someone else. Right? Because I don't have $100,000 sitting around. And meanwhile, I had double that sitting in my 401k.
Right.
But I couldn't take advantage of that deal because I had no access to cash. Now, fast forward, I'm 4 years into implementing infinite banking and Become Your Own Banker. I'm sitting on a lot of cash at this point. And I say, you know what? I'm really feeling called to teach people this. Like, why aren't more people doing this? And I felt like God put his thumb in my back and was like, why don't you do it? And so I literally went home, talked to my wife, and we started on the path of me being an advisor to people, teaching this concept. And right as I left Wells Fargo, I had 2 people. This is no joke, Tom. I mean, 2 people come to me and they did not fit the traditional financing box for a home loan. And they're sitting there like, hey, I want to buy this house, my primary residence, but I just don't have the credit, or I don't have whatever the case may be. And I looked at their situation. I was like, man, those are good loans, but they won't fit at the, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, traditional financing. And I'm sitting on all this cash in my system. So I literally personally did private mortgages on 2 houses because I was sitting on all this cash. I never would have been able to take advantage of that if I just had my 401k. So I had 2 mortgages that were 15-year notes at 10% each when rates were in the 4s, at the time, because they didn't fit the mold. And I got paid very handsomely over that time. And my system kept growing while those loans were out. So that was you talk about how did I get into private, passive income? That was one of the very first things I did. It's because one, I understood it because I had 11 years of mortgage experience and I had cash because I'd been doing infinite banking for 4 years and had all this cash just sitting there waiting to be deployed. That's how it started. And man, it's just been rocket fuel since then.
Unbelievable. Right. I mean, that idea of, when you have money hanging around, opportunities seek you out or find you.
Every time.
Pop up. And
every time.
It's quite amazing. Yeah, I've had numerous cases where I just, to your point, I use them just like that. Just a neighbor was foreclosing on a home and they couldn't afford to keep it, and they're like, "Can you please buy it?" And then allow them to rent for a while, and then sold it to them for a nice profit. But I had to have cash, right, and availability, liquidity, and I come across this very often with people. Other than maybe a little bit of money in their bank account, access to very little, and they got to wait till they retire to get access.
Exactly.
Right.
And in the meantime, life is passing you by.
Right.
Every day, every minute. And I'm just passionate about this because the life that I have now compared to the life when I was in that corporate grind is night and day. This is not to gloat by any means. I'm just telling you, I'm one beggar trying to tell other beggars where to find the bread, if you will. But man, even yesterday was Father's Day, and I'm sitting there with my 5 daughters, and they've given me these, what I love about dad cards and stuff. You've probably seen them. And one of the things one of my daughters says, she's a teenager. She's 15. She says, Dad, I'm just really glad that I can tell you anything, that you're safe, and that I love spending time with you. And I'm like, that's not a direct correlation with passive income. But what it is it's a result of my time being more my own, because I go to every one of her golf tournaments. These are 5 and 6 hour commitments in the middle of the week all the time. Well, could I have done that when I was in the mortgage business working 60 hours a week? Not a chance, not even close. And now, fast forward, I'm able to do this. The result is, man, my daughter knows that I'm there to support her. And it results in her being able to share things with me that she otherwise probably would have been closed off from.
That's amazing.
Again, I'm not telling you to gloat. I'm just saying that there's one thing to say, hey, yeah, we've created over $50,000 a month in passive income. That's awesome. But what is the why behind it? And for me, it's stuff like that.
Yeah. And you got to be, and that I think for a lot of folks, I think for some people may not even recognize why they're doing a lot of things they're doing. So I think that's a good point, Joey, from a perspective. Sometimes you got to, make sure you're clear on it in terms
every time.
Right? What's most important to you? Like describe your time with your daughters, to be there and support her in her younger years as she's, going to tournaments or whatever the case is. But be clear on that and recognize that there are potentially other paths, right? You just have to be willing to be open-minded to explore them. And, I often, before we start recording, one of the things I wanted you to share a little bit more about too, that probably relates to this too, is I get often asked, like, where do I invest? Right? That's usually the question I get, because they don't know, right? Where do I invest? Yeah. And that's usually not the right question. I said, what are you investing for? Right? What's the purpose of it? And, how does that fit to your, I love the way you guys position it, like your investor DNA. Like, what is that? Like, how do you just, uncover that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Man, it's 100%. And you're so true and right. Number one, the road to financial freedom is not easy. The formula is easy, but the work to accomplish it is hard. It's not like, just accidentally falling into it. You have to be very purposeful in that journey. And by the way, when it gets hard, if you don't have the why, you're going to give up, right? So you're not wrong by saying, what are you investing for? Because if that's big enough, you're going to do the hard work to get you there. But the second thing that you pointed out is try having a name like Wealth Without Wall Street. The very first thing everybody wants to know is, well, what do you invest in? Because if it's not Wall Street, what could it be? And to your point, man, if you're not investing in a way that reflects who you are, then you're going to do it wrong, or it's at least going to be a lot longer journey. Okay. So for instance, are you the type, everybody has their God-given experiences and their resources, and all of these things are unique to you, right? So Tom, you said you're originally from Thailand, or your parents are from Thailand. I don't have that experience at all, right? And never will. There are people that have different corporate background than I have. Maybe they're more legal. They had a legal background. I have no background in that. Well, there's certain investments that should be more appealing to someone like you or to me that vice versa do not work. So it really frustrates me when people get on podcasts and they're like, oh, everybody should be investing in multifamily because blah, 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 blah. Well, that's because that's what they sell.
Right.
That's what they do. What you should be investing in is things that align with who you are. And again, those things are all very unique, but your personality profile really largely dictates that. So Are you a high D personality, like someone who wants to take charge, affect change, to direct people into different things? Like maybe more of a business that you advise is a better fit for you than someone who's like a high C. And when I'm talking about D and C, that's the DISC profile.
Right.
If you've never taken that, our investor DNA profile is based off of that. That's why I use that. But a high C is like very analytical, very detailed. They love a process. And you tell them to go and like start a business and they're like, that is a terrible idea. Like, I don't want the unknowns, and I don't want to be like, center of attention to run this company sometimes, right? But you give them something where they can analyze a deal and they can add value in their way by saying, what if we change this expense here and we add this income stream here? Now they can actually really affect that investment, and they love it, and it's steady, right? So you talk about like a turnkey real estate property. If you give me a turnkey real estate property, I'm an SI. I'm really not that interested in it. It's kind of boring to me. I can't do a whole lot with it. I can just buy it and forget it. Whereas a high C loves it. It's known. It's proven. It's been there for 100 plus years. Like, I know what I'm getting when I get there. This is a great thing. So my point is, take your investor DNA, find out what sort of investor you are. And then we actually have 10 passive income ideas that are on a spreadsheet that show you the pros, the cons, and the resources required to be successful at each one. And it helps you to kind of filter down and say, well, maybe syndications is what I really need to do, because I'm a high S and I don't like to be in the spotlight. I don't want to have conflict. I just want to be able to put my money to work and be paid out the investment dollars. It gives me the passive income that I need to achieve my goal, or maybe it's, I need to start a Turo business because I do want to affect those changes. So my point is there's 10 of those. You find out your investor DNA, you filter it through, and you figure out your one or two that you need to focus on. And man, how much faster can you get to financial freedom if you're aligned with the investments that you're making?
Yeah, and you get excited to learn about them, right? Just like, I get excited to learn about certain things. I am a C, so I love process. So you're spot on. That's I started with some turnkey real estate investments.
See, I did not know that about you before we started, did we?
Yeah, no.
It's just who you are, man. It's just how God made you. It's awesome.
Yeah. And so but that's to that point, and you hit the nail on the head. There's not one investment that is right for everybody, right? And I think it's really part of the exploration, but obviously the conventional or typical advice is this is the only place you should put your money.
Man, I'll tell you this, and I have stories for everything, but earlier this year, we had a live event, and one of the guys that's in our Inner Circle Plus mastermind attended the event. And beforehand, he had 25 years in the construction industry. He had been overseeing projects in the self-storage space and making money for somebody else. Like, that was his, and he kind of had this realization, like, wait a minute, I'm helping somebody else who's not running the company very well make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And he attends this event. He gets so fired up at the event. He sets the date. All right, I'm going to make an exit. And it was like 18 months down the road or something like that. I can't recall the exact date. But he has a clear path because he's walked through our whole process. He knows his investor DNA. He's getting involved in land flipping. That was like his best fit based on his priorities. And he texted me through our app. We have an app, and there's like a messaging component. And he messaged me. He said, man, I just wanted to make you aware, you and Russ, that as of yesterday, I went ahead and exited my company 9 months earlier than I anticipated. And it always becomes the mindset shift and the connections I made at your event and going through this process. I now am taking my son to eat donuts when I never would have been able to do it. It's so funny, Tom. It's like, I don't care what that thing is for you. Like for him, it's like, I can't take my son to go get donuts, but now I can. For me, it was taking my daughters to their golf tournaments. There's other things. I don't know what it is for you or for you listening, but for him, he pointed that out. And I was like, man, that is so amazing that one, he hit that goal so much faster. And I'm tying this to our point about investor DNA. He knew that he could be successful in that because of his experience, because of his personality, and now getting the training on it. He had the confidence and the competence to make that switch. And I mean, he's just taken off, and it's just an amazing thing to watch.
No, that is really, it's awesome. And to that point, once you recognize your DNA and what's a better fit, and you start learning so much about it, in my opinion, you actually are reducing your risk in your investment world because you just know more. You're better suited for certain types of investments, and you are just more experienced and maybe have a bigger network in that space to help you, right?
100%.
Be successful. So I just, this whole high risk, high reward. Yeah, there's certain things that, we're going to take some risk on things, but I think there's ways to reduce that quite a bit if you put the time and energy and like do something like understand your investor DNA more.
Great point. Great point, Tom.
So, I know we're coming up on, but I did want to talk too, which I found interesting. I mentioned to you before we got on, was that I found it fascinating that you sort of post your passive income sort of performance for all to see. And so obviously you've done very, very well, and you can share more about that. But like, why do you do that? What's the point?
Tom, I hate to say it's selfish, but once you start to realize that your biggest need is passive income, there's a couple of ways you can get there, right? You can do it on your own, and you can keep it a secret. And there's a very good chance that you're not going to accomplish it as fast as you could as if you put it out there in front of people. So just as an example, 2020, we started posting our passive income report, and it was embarrassing. It's like, these guys have been interviewing people for, at the time, I guess it had been 3 years. We've been interviewing people since 2017 on all these different passive income ideas. And yet we were sitting at about $2,500 combined between Russ and I a month in passive income. And some of you may say, man, that's not too bad. Well, it's not too bad unless you realize your expenses are way more than $2,500 a month. And so there's no freedom. And so we started putting this out there in a podcast and in a video recording to show our report of where we're investing, why we're investing, what's the results, and all that. And that number has grown to up over $50,000 a month.
Wow.
Every single month since then. And our goal is for it to be $100,000 per month between the two of us. And the only way it's going to happen is by tracking it and reporting on it. Like one of our mentors said, you can have lots of success by tracking something if it's important to you, right? But if you want to have exponential results, you track it and report it. And it just creates that. I mean, every month when we have to report on that, we stop and we think, well, crap, have we been doing the most that we could do? Right? What are we focused on? Like, how can we get that number to go up next month? And it just is a constant reminder. It's a focus that helps us to really continue to push that number up.
No, that's smart. And it's that adage, whatever you can't measure, you can't manage it, right? You can't improve it, and so you're making it very clear to people. This is a way to get back that freedom, and certainly hold you guys accountable for it too, for yourselves.
Yeah. And we learned it from guys like Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas, really, successful podcasters who have done that with affiliate marketing typically and sponsorships and things like that. And we saw them doing it. We're like, man, that's putting it out there. Like, we need to be eating our own cooking, as we say down here in the South.
Absolutely. I love that. I love it. So what's next for you guys for Wealth Without Wall Street? What's big on the horizon for you guys? Because you guys are always, I'm sure you guys are always building and creating. Like what's coming down the pike that you guys want to share with the audience?
Yeah, well, we launched a passive income mastermind and Inner Circle Plus. Those are our two levels of masterminds within the last 18 months. And it's been very successful. Had a lot of people that just want to be a part of what we're doing and grow and learn along with us. And it's been really exciting. I want to continue to grow those two communities because I think there's just a lot more for us to do. And the second thing is we have figured out that there are opportunities that we can't necessarily take down with our own capital. Mm. And there's opportunity for people to invest alongside us. So we're trying to identify exactly what those might look like and what places we want to invest along with others. And so that's really exciting. I mean, we're just in the process. We spent 2 weeks ago in the British Virgin Islands at one of our mastermind events. And the whole process of that week was how to build a fund and what goes into putting those together. And so that's really what's on the horizon for us.
All right. Well, you okay? So, no, that's great. And not that I needed another reason to have you come back, but as that stuff gets more refined, I guess, and I'd love for you to come back and share more details about that. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So for anyone who's interested in learn more about, investor DNA or Wealth Without Wall Street, what's the best way to kind of connect with you guys, you and Russ?
Yeah, well, we'd love to have you join us in the community or listen to the podcast. You can go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/perennial pride. And on there, you can find more information about our masterminds. You can talk to one of our coaches if you want to, or you can actually get access to the Investor DNA profile. And so love for you to check any of those resources out and let us know you heard us on the Perennial Pride podcast, because we always love to know where people come from.
Awesome. Well, Joey, listen, I had a blast here. I know this will not be the last conversation we're having. I appreciate all you guys do. I enjoy listening to your podcast, sometimes more than doing my own. So keep up all the good work, great stuff, and bringing the possibilities of financial freedom to, the masses here. I think it's needed. And I think there's more people want it. They just don't have the guides at their disposal to help them. But you're doing some great work, and, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I love being with people who are like-minded. So this has been great.
All right. Well, take care of those 5 girls.
Will do.
All right. Thanks, Joey.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.